We have with us today for our panel Dr. Vanessa Ogden, we have Deborah Weston, and we have Paul Smalley. And I'll just give you a little bit of background that our panel members may want to say some more about themselves. But if you were at our AGM in May, you will have met Vanessa. Dr. Vanessa Ogden has been a member of the Curriculum and Assessment Review panel, and she has been tasked with taking forward the recommendations on RE. Vanessa's the CEO of the Mulberry Schools Trust and will be moving on to become the DFE's regional director for London. So many of you have already had the opportunity to have a chat with Vanessa and meet her at the AGM, and it's really lovely to welcome you to this webinar. Thank you, Vanessa. Deborah Weston, a few of you may have met before. Deborah is currently the company secretary of the REC. She's the research officer for NatRe. She is data cruncher extraordinaire and author of the National Content Standard for Religious Education, which is highlighted in the Curriculum and Assessment Review report. Paul Smalley is a board member of the REC. He is an educational consultant. He's looking a bit worried about what I might say. Executive Officer for the National Association of SACRAs, teaches at Liverpool Hope University and writes very good articles about RE. So thank you all for joining us today. What I'm going to ask you to do in the first instance is to give us a bit of an overview. So I think if we can start with you, Vanessa, if you could give us an overview of where we are at this moment and where we might be going. And I noticed the words behind you are talking about, the words behind you talk about the future and going into the future. That seems really appropriate, but it would be really great if you could give us that overview and inspire us a bit about what the next steps might be. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for that lovely welcome. I really appreciate it, and I see names around the table, as it were, the virtual table of you all out there listening to this that I recognise and feel very privileged to be among, as you're people who've been part of my RE journey for 32 years. It seems like it couldn't possibly be that long, but it is. Thank you for asking me to come today, because what we have now is a really important few months. So where we are currently, we've been through a year, more than a year, probably about 14, 15 months of the National Curriculum Review process. And a huge amount of evidence, as I mentioned before, was collected during that period of time and collected in all sorts of ways. We had the call for evidence virtually through online submission. We had all of the visits to each of the regions and the sort of round tables with various stakeholders in each of the regions across the country. We had other roundtables and other data collection of quantitative data and data from this jurisdiction and other jurisdictions. And then the panel, after having put all of that together and received a paper from me in January time, asked me then, as you know, to do a deep dive into the subject, which is when I came to the RE Council to talk. And I had a very short space of time in which to conduct that deep dive. It was about 4 or 5 weeks. But during that time, heard from a huge range of people, including from the RE Council and from some members separately about some of the work that they're doing separately, and different faith communities, as well as other belief communities too. So that was all put together into a paper which very openly reflected the range of views that I had heard during the course of that deep dive. And from that then came the recommendations. So the panel felt very strongly that it would really like to see RE in the national curriculum in order to deal with many of the issues that have been raised throughout this time and for some years now. About the diminishment of the subject in the situation of academy freedoms. and also the importance of the dual system, and also the importance of SACRAs playing into this. They had heard all of that, but felt that that it wanted to see RE in the national curriculum. And I'm now simplifying and summarising for interest of time a quite long paper and some quite deep considerations by the panel. But what the panel also understood was how complex and sensitive that work needs to be, and that it cannot just be, iterated. It needs the sector to take responsibility for it. So the recommendation was therefore to invite the sector to come together to see if it could build on the consensus around the national content standard and draft enough of a curriculum that could become the programmes of study in the national curriculum. We're not allowed to call them programmes of study, so we can't call them draft programmes of study until they actually are in the national curriculum. It's a legal definition. But to draft effectively that in a way that could bring everybody together to agree that certain things are taught in our curriculum to all children. Now, I was asked to lead that work because it developed straight out of the work of the panel. But I have a very short time span in which to do this. My role as an independent person of the DFE ends on the 31st of March. I don't think it's a bad thing to have a short space of time. We had a lot of consensus through the deep dive. And we have the national content standard already, and actually to draft a curriculum we could probably all of us do in about 48 hours flat, given the experience that we have in the sector about this over time historically. The issue is going to be much more about agreeing what we can collectively find a settlement for, and I use that word very intentionally, that this has to be a settlement for the children of this country. I've drafted, and so where I am currently with this is that I've drafted a set of terms of reference that are going through various channels at the moment, and we will consult very widely with reference groups and an expert advisory group. And that's all being set up at the moment and will commence in earnest in January. I will write a short report that will go with that work. And what I'm hoping very much is that we will be able to present to the Secretary of State at the end of March a set of material curricula alongside a short report which also talks about the importance of SACRAs and the role that they can play in this, and other things like, for example, the need to have better training for teachers, the need for professional development, how we can collectively get together and resource that within the sector. It's a moment really where I feel that we can refresh the visibility and the importance of the subject. I think it's fantastic that government and the panel recognises the importance of the subject such that it should be in the national curriculum. And that is a big step forward. I've had to fight for the subject for 32 years, and to be in a space where government says, yes, we see this, we see the importance of it, is for me very meaningful, actually. And if we're talking about building a new day, which is behind me, around social cohesion and community cohesion, that for me is the aim, to have a society that we can all live in together with all our differences and value that and recognise it and become harmonious. So that's a very important moment for the sector, I think. And so my aim is to ensure that we can deliver on that. It is not to upset the dual system, and this is not to underplay the role of SACRAs, for sure. Those things remain incredibly valuable to our sector, and they are written clearly into the terms of reference. So there should be no question.
Thank you, Vanessa, for summarising something that's a huge piece of work in so few words. And I'm sure there are things there that Deborah and Paul and some of our other members will want to pick up on. So thank you for providing that starting point. Deborah, did you want to go next? I think that was the implication from when we were speaking before. Deborah, you need to unmute.
Yes, okay, thank you. I'm here now. Okay, so I just want to say, a big congratulations to Vanessa as well for getting us to this point, because I don't think anybody should understate or can understate just how significant her involvement has been in this work. I also want to offer a lot of congratulations to many people on this call, because, of course, as you've seen from what's been said by Vanessa, the National Content Standard has been a significant part of the discussion. For so many years, we've heard, haven't we, that the religious education community can never agree on anything to do with religious education, what it should be like, what the standards should be, how we should teach it, and so on. And I've never believed that to be true, and it's never been my experience of working with all of you. So the National Content Standard essentially demonstrated that we could actually come to an agreement, and come to an agreement on some really quite significant things, particularly in terms of what high quality RE looks like, what the standard is. So, so many of you were involved in your own groups of signing up to the National Content Standard, and it's only because you did that that we were able, in our evidence to the Curriculum and Assessment Review, to be able to say, these people have signed up, these organisations, these academy trusts, these faith and belief organisations have signed up to this. So nobody could say that we can't agree. So when the report came out, and I'll just quickly share a couple of slides here, and Sarah's going to be taking a deep breath now, thinking, oh my gosh, here she goes. So I won't go, I'll just show a few slides. So this was the conclusions that are in the report. Sarah, can you nod at me if you can see the slide? So this line, and there's a lot on page 111, which is very much, the whole report is obviously worth reading, but this page 111 has got a lot of joy for the RE world. So having evaluated the evidence, we are of the view that RE's importance is not currently reflected in its standing in the curriculum. And that was one of the points that we made in the evidence we put through, that the status of religious education has diminished. And I won't rehearse all the reasons why it's diminished, but it has diminished over time, particularly over the last 14 years. And the review believes that RE should be moved to the national curriculum to improve access to high quality provision and to prevent further diminishment. And that was really a great echo of the principles that we laid down about equity, that yes, there is fantastic religious education going on in some schools, in some areas, in some types of schools, but that is not universal. And high quality RE for all children in all schools is the #1 aim of the Religious Education Policy Unit, and indeed of the REC. So the recommendation Vanessa's already mentioned, that the sector would establish an independent task and finish group. So this is the sector doing it and not the government doing it. But then once that a consensus, which we hope we can reach, to develop a draft RE curriculum, building on the RE's national content standard, then the government says it will consult on those programmes of study and then potentially then legislative change. And it says there in the third section, the DFE should consider legislative framework for RE, including, for example, what changes to its status in the curriculum would mean for functions such as standing advisory councils on RE, which Vanessa's mentioned again. So that's really important. And then there's another comment about the subject content of the optional GCSE in religious studies. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, because the timeline is interesting. So in terms of SACRAs, I'll leave Paul to talk about SACRAs because that's his world. But I'll also just mention some references to the NCS. And it says that the group should be consultative, continuing the work of the review. liaising with relevant external parties, which of course includes members of the RE Council. Building on the REC's national content standard, the group should also consider where there will be benefit in changing the name. And then the second point that I found was the idea of standardising the curriculum offered for RE. We've already done some work on that. And again, the national content standards are mentioned in that context. And it's building strong foundations for change. It hasn't actually made change happen yet, but it has built foundations for that. So let's move on to this. So I'll just move on to run another point, and that's the steps that were set out for how this can happen. So first of all, stage one, the consensus building, the independent task and finish group. So simultaneously drafting the curriculum, but also building consensus as we go along through the process, particularly the terms of reference, which Vanessa's already laid out. And then stage two, testing it, basing on the, testing if it's going to work, if it's going to get that consensus and whether we can work with it in our different contexts. Then the legislative and structural review, and then finally implementation and support. And I was so happy to see this bit, and every teacher on the call is going to be jumping up and down seeing this. National guidance, we haven't had the guidance changed since 2010. It's out of date. The academies had only just come in at that point, so it definitely needs revision. Exemplification, so that's something which hasn't been done since the days of QCDA, exemplification of standards, and CPD, because none of this can work at all if we do not have the teachers, high quality, well-trained teachers, and enough of them to deliver religious education in our schools. We have to have quality teachers, and we've been, the RE policy unit has been lobbying hard on getting the bursary restored, because without that bursary, we are unlikely to recruit the number of teachers that we need. This next slide, public examinations, the timeline sounds like it's a very long time in the future, but you'll remember that when we last revised GCSE and A-level, GCSE and A-level were both done at the same time. And that created an enormous pressure on time, on the ability for us to consult, the ability for exam boards to be able to implement these changes. And this is clearly set out that it's going to be happening over at different times. And the exams, the first exams for GCSE, not until 2031. And the other section I saw was in the government's response to the panel, and that was the accountability measures. We know and we have clear evidence that the English Baccalaureate has done more damage to the level of provision for RE than almost any other measure, because it's the short course stopped counting entirely, and the full course became in the sort of the final bucket of the EBAC and didn't count in the humanities. This model, and this is a proposal, I should emphasise, not yet ratified by the government, but it is a proposal. And I looked at that table 2, pupil B, and there is religious studies in the humanities box, where I think everybody would agree it rightfully belongs. But the slimming down of the core and modern foreign language not being there as a compulsory element of this being EBAC, as it were, means there's more space in the breadth, which I hope will mean that if children want to do 2 languages, 2 humanities or so on, then they'll have the option to do so. And just for clarity, what people will have to do is 2 of the following 3 areas: humanities, creative subjects and languages. So 2 of those 3, not 3 of those 3. And that is all I really wanted to say. So I'm very happy to take questions at the end, but I shall hand over to my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. And that's a reminder, if you would like to put questions in the chat, if anything's occurring to you as we go through and you listen, or you can jot it down and save it for later in case somebody else mentions whatever you're thinking of. One thing I did want to pick up from what Deborah was saying was about the evidence that the RE Council provided to the Curriculum and Assessment Review. That evidence came from the consultation with our members. So you may remember completing surveys, having conversations at I can't remember whether it was I think it was the AGM. I get AGMs and SRGMs muddled up. Anyway, a general meeting that will cover it. So the evidence came from the wide range of REC member organisations. And that's really important because we recognise there's a huge diversity in that membership. But actually, one of the things that everybody who completed the survey agreed with was that we need change, that the situation for RE as it stands now is not what any of us wants. So I think that's an important thing to hang on to. Paul, would you like to give us your overview?
Yeah, sure, thank you. Um, First of all, I want to add my thanks and congratulations to Dr. Vanessa Ogden. I think she's done a marvellous job. I think it's been really, really good that she's been able to bring the subject to this point that we're at, and clearly taken on board a whole range of people's views and interests. And I think that's no mean task. So well done, and thank you for that. Um, what am I particularly pleased about the report? Well, um, as I've already said, I'm really pleased that through this report it appears that our subject is being taken seriously. When this process started, there was a fear that RE maybe wouldn't even be included, that it would be ignored, that it would be put in the too difficult bucket. And I'm really glad that this report has taken hold of some of the challenges and really grappled with them. I think that's marvellous. I think it's really good that we're in this situation. I'm also really pleased um, that it's been an evidence-based review. And you've mentioned the REC's evidence. I'm utterly delighted about footnote 302 and footnote 303. And if anyone on the call hasn't paid huge amounts of attention to that, they are two reports that I personally was involved in doing. One of them was the NASACRA report about funding. And what that showed um, is that we know that there are places in the country where SACRAs do an amazing job and work really hard to support communities and to support schools and teachers to deliver really high quality RE. But we know that when we look across the board, there's too many places where there isn't proper funding, there isn't proper support, there isn't real help for them. And in those situations, SACRAs understandably struggle. Um, there are perhaps, and this isn't in the report, there are perhaps about a dozen SACRAs that haven't actually even submitted the annual report for the last 3 years. That's the first major responsibility of a SACRA, and they haven't done it. I know one of SACRA's people's concerns is that they might lose something. They might lose some authority, some autonomy. Um, One thing that I have been uh, banging on about probably for a number of years is the thing that we in the world of RE often forget, that no SACRA writes a syllabus. No SACRA writes a curriculum. That is a separate body, an agreed syllabus conference. In many places they look the same, but it's delightful to hear that Vanessa talking so positively about SACRAs, that they are important. And taking away the right of writing a syllabus or the necessity of writing a syllabus, if it is in the national curriculum, that's never been a SACRA's responsibility. That's always been an agreed syllabus responsibility. Um, Another thing I'm really pleased about, and if people on the call have only read the pages on RE, they might have missed this, but the curriculum is presented as a curriculum for all. And I think that's really important for our subject, that all pupils have a place in this curriculum, from the highest achievers to those with the most barriers to learning. And I understand that that means all pupils, whatever religion and belief background they come from. And I think that's really important to remember, that it's a curriculum for all. All pupils have a place in this. I'm really pleased about everything that Deborah's talked around, the stage process, the inclusive nature of the work that is going to go on from now on. I think I'm going to stop there, and I think you're going to ask in a little while. You're going to ask about opportunities and challenges. So I'll not steal my thunder from that bit.
No, you're stealing my thunder now, Paul. Telling everybody what questions I'm going to ask next. It's supposed to sound as though it was spontaneous and response. Um, Thank you, all three of you. That was a really interesting overview and range of different reflections there. So I am, as Paul has predicted, going to ask, and I don't mind who goes first, what do you think is the biggest set of opportunities here at this point in time? And if you want to go first, just go for it.
I will jump in and go first. Um, I think the two biggest opportunities are what I hope will come out of this process is a reimagining of the local. So the fear with a national curriculum is that it's bland and national, and I hope that actually what we can get out of this national curriculum is a reimagined local. And I wrote something last year about how the situation we are in now is we have a locality by accident, and we have localities the size of Tower Hamlets, we have localities the size of Halton, we have localities the size of Kent and the size of Lancashire, the size of North Yorkshire. They're not real localities. So what I hope comes out of this process going forward is a reimagined local. And secondly, building on what Vanessa has already said, I hope that there is a reinvigoration of the work of CAARs. And I'll just leave it as that.
Thanks, Paul. I think you must have just had some kind of link there with what Janet's just posted as a question about sacres and localities. So that's quite interesting. Janet, you may want to come back on that later on, but I think just as you were speaking, the question came along there. Vanessa.
Yeah, so just to answer a couple of questions in the chat about sacros. I mean, so that Paul saying, I do see this as a real opportunity to celebrate the role that sacros have had in the system for many, many years. And I remember 32 years ago when I started teaching, sacre was incredibly important to me. They recently only really got going, and we had the model syllabuses, all that work that Barbara Winterskill had done, which was just so incredible. And in that time and space, really meeting the needs of youngsters at that time in the system as Britain was becoming more and more plural. Now we're in this different space and a society where you have a sort of immediacy of being able to connect up with events globally on the other side of the world at any given moment, because you can see things happening in real time, and an intensity about the lived experience of sort of citizenry that I think is different again. And so the role of SACRO is to help and support local people, and I'm talking about schools and their communities, to really, so helping youngsters to really understand what your community is and how you are harmonious, build cohesion within that community that you live in, to understand that, and then be able to understand it within this kind of maelstrom of information that comes to you all the time, this intensity of lived experience. And I think sacros have a really important role around guiding and being the wise resource, with all of those elders. I mean, I count myself as an elder, but these elders in our communities whose voices otherwise go unheard. I think there's possibly even a more influential role to play in government as well. Actually, I mean, I where do you go to If you have a sudden crisis in the world of the magnitude that we are seeing in some spaces. So if you just take the conflict and in Palestine, Gaza, and Israel, where do you go to get help and advice other than to go to the faith communities that are caught up in this is the place that you go to. So I think there's something about how SACROS can provide those resources locally to schools, but also importantly to governments and sort of local sort of combined mayoral authorities. There's something about connecting up that SACROS can do, I think, which is perhaps more ambitious, but certainly where I'm coming from on this. And I wrote this in the paper. I think it's very important that we have local study as part of whatever we put forward to government for the national curriculum. But I do think that advisory space is crucial. Heads don't want to, they don't know what to do about flags. When Tim Coulson goes round to schools at the moment, they don't know what to do about flags. Of course, in this case now, we're not talking about the flags that were hung in the streets for Palestine and Gaza. We're talking about the flags that have been hung that are making a point about nationalism and exclusion. So I think, that there's something very important about how we provide that elder voice and wisdom in this sector to the people that we live and work with.
Thank you. Deborah, did you want to pick up on any opportunities that you see at the moment?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think, as you know, and you mentioned earlier, I've been crunching the data for many years, and the obvious thing to say about it is that it has continued to get worse over the last decade, particularly. Current situation, 1 in 6 schools are reporting 0 hours of religious education in year 11. And they include all different types of schools. When the academies first came into being, it was the academies who were the largest percentage of that. But over the years, the schools that are not academies, community schools, have caught up with that figure. And it even includes some schools with a religious character who also report 0 hours of RE. So there's no equity for children in this respect. And even parents choosing specific schools, it doesn't mean they're going to get equity provision for religious education. And that is incredibly important and was one of the headlines of the panel's work to try to achieve greater equity across the curriculum. So I think I'm really pleased that is an opportunity for us to work on. It's not going to be easy. I don't think anybody will think it's going to be easy, because what has to go along with that, even if you have a national curriculum, you've still got to find the appropriate accountability measures. But I think there's another part of that, which is to win over hearts and minds. If we have a clear national curriculum that sets out what it is religious education is doing, then those people who make decisions about curriculum will hopefully be won over to the importance that we see in religious education, particularly, as Vanessa said, in the current context, but widely. An example of that, I guess, in another sort of data headline is to say, even if you use GCSE as an indicator of how committed schools are to religious education, and you measure that by local authority and you rank them, at the bottom of the league table, a significantly sized local authority enters on average 11% of the children for GCSE full course. At the top of the league table, 84%. So again, even equity in terms of access to study religious education at Key Stage 4 doesn't exist in this country. So I think that's another great opportunity for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I think there's always a flip side. So we're going to look at the flip side now, because sometimes when we talk about opportunity, we are also highlighting where there might be issues. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that might be facing us as the sector at the moment in moving forwards? I don't know who wants to go first on that one. Or Paul does. He likes the challenges.
I will, yes. Well, it's easy because all I'm going to do is list some challenges, and other people have the problem of sorting out the challenges and finding the answer to these. Um, the first one is something that has already been mentioned, but I think it will be a challenge to ensure that those rights of schools' religious character in the dual system are maintained. You know, I'm confident that there is a solution. I don't know what it is, but hopefully that's a challenge that the group, I don't know what we're calling it. Is it a task and finish group or a task and finish group that they're going to be able to grapple with? The second one, and further down the line, but a problem now, is around initial teacher education, around continuing professional development, training, uh, and development for staff. You know, already we have schools that where there are not enough RE staff. If, as a result of this, there is more RE happening, we're going to need even more people to teach that. Um, and so there's a job of work to do ensuring that high quality training is available for people. I think, and this is one of the concerns that I think Nigel Genders raised during the consultation around how we protect the RE curriculum within a national curriculum from any possible undue future political interference. Um, it seems as though we have a government whose education policies are, I'll speak personally, in line with mine. They're seeking to achieve the things I want our education system to achieve. But in 5 or 10 years' time, we might have a different government. How do we protect um, the vision of our subject in that situation? And my final one, fourth challenge, is the interim. And already I've heard of um, local authorities essentially saying to SACRAs, oh, you don't need to worry about a curriculum anymore. You don't need to worry about anything. Let it slide because there'll be a national curriculum next year. Now, clearly that's not the situation, but I worry that in the interim, there might be even more diminishment.
Thank you, Paul, for those clearly articulated points of concern or challenges. And I think anything that's worth doing will have challenges. So it's not unexpected. And actually, you have echoed some of the points that people have made in the chat already as well. So it's really helpful to know that there are some strands that are being articulated in different
Right.
places.
I can't see the chat, so whatever someone's putting in there, I don't know.
But no, I know. Well, I think it just shows where some of the thinking is at the moment, which is very helpful. Um, Vanessa or Deborah, would you like to come back with any of the challenges that you see, Vanessa?
Yeah, I think Paul is right. I mean, when I wrote the paper for the panel, I heard very loud and clear from the RE Council meeting actually the worries about politicisation. So that was fed back to the panel. And the whole thing around teacher development has been a constant theme actually throughout the panel's work. It wasn't in our purview, but it came through over and over again that there is concern in the system about supply and quality and resources available for development. And I really hear all of those things. I suppose what I hope I can do with this is that in the report that I write that goes alongside whatever goes to the Secretary of State for Education will highlight those things in a way that also celebrates the RE sector and what it has done over certainly the 32 years that I have been in the profession so far, because there's a huge amount of absolutely fabulous, rich work that has been done over that time. I mean, Deborah, I know you kept a copy of the QCA website, I think, for RE, because all of those exemplification materials that you and I worked on, for example, and many of you around the table, I mean, concept cracking, I know Trevor's on the call somewhere, you know, you've got the Big Ideas Project now, you know, you had the FAIR report, you know, West Hill, all of that quality thinking about the teaching of RE, whilst it will need updating in relation to the very specifics of what we will end up doing in schools now, then you know there's a huge amount, I think, of celebration to do, and also remembering actually what we have done. The challenge is going to be the settlement. That's the challenge that I face, is people having the confidence in what we do to know that there is no desire to undermine the dual system. Absolutely not. It is one of the celebrated rights and freedoms of our democracy in this country that people can go to a school of religious character that is paid for by the state. I mean, you know, there are some countries, but here, it's, for me, it's that you have that choice is important, and important not to undermine. And there is a whole history about how the dual system exists now in our system, and it's very important to me that people who worry about that have confidence that there is no desire to undermine that in any way. So the challenge for me is creating enough of a settlement around this that people feel, everyone feels, they can sign up to what will be presented to the Secretary of State if we're able to collectively get to that point. That's the challenge for me. I think it's probably the biggest challenge, actually. And I just very much hope that we can get to that point. If we can't, and we can't collectively agree something that can be in the national curriculum for our subject for all children, then the report that I write will be that we've tried, and how we've tried, and what the barriers are that remain. But I really hope that that's not the kind of report that I'm going to end up writing.
Thank you. Deborah, your
Yes,
turn.
yes. So challenges. It's interesting. I've just seen in the chat that Philip's asked the question that I was going to talk about in terms of legislative change. And are there risks, he's saying, in seeking legislative change of any kind? And I think, yes, there are risks, and we shouldn't hide behind that. But the issue is, I think, that if you look at Hansard for 1987, in other words, the passage of the law that brought in the Education Reform Act in 88, and you look at the references to RE, you can see the kind of comments that were made, and some people on very different ends of a spectrum on what should happen and what RE should look like. We have a very different government now, and have for many years, actually. It's not just the most recent government, in terms of people's attitudes to religious education in the House. Yes, of course, there are people who have views that are different from what we would see as high quality RE. But, you know, we've been working as the RE Council and NATRE, the RE Policy Unit, for many, many years now, more than 10 years, to talk to people. And they absolutely get the importance of religious education. And they absolutely get what the potential is for the subject. And they're quite shocked to hear about the kind of problems that we're facing. But that work has got to go on in the time we've got before it comes to legislation, I think. And that involves everybody in the RE Council making sure that they are well informed, that members of the House of Commons and the House of Lords are well informed about what religious education is. The second challenge, I think, is the one I've mentioned already, and that is, and we mustn't underplay this, and that is the workforce. NATRE Primary Survey has for many years recorded similar figures for the level of training that primary teachers get at initial teacher training. And I think it was 56% of them said that they got between 0 and 3 hours of training. 0 and 3 hours, that's all in their entire teacher training to teach religious education. And 18%, so almost 1 in 5, had no training whatsoever, and then they're expected to deliver high quality RE to children. So I think that's something that's got to be addressed, and of course the recruitment issue that I've already mentioned, that is leading to so many people who mainly teach another subject teaching religious education, and that is a significant problem. Thank you.
Vanessa, I think you wanted to pick up on something that Deborah said there.
Yes, it's the point about legislation. I mean, we've been asked to advise through this report on the legislative changes that are needed, and I absolutely understand the worry about risks, but you know, I will. You know, as far as it's ever possible to be able to do this, I will make sure that what we write in terms of that advice to the Secretary of State for Education is really tight around the laws. You know, as far as it's possible for anybody to do, and we have some brilliant people in the sector who are very experienced and very knowledgeable about this. So I do understand. The point that's being made is one about then how it moves in the system. But so far, I have felt real confidence, particularly in the last few weeks, once the report has been out. And I mean, it was just under a month ago that it was produced. And in that time, spoken to civil servants that I haven't spoken to before, and had feedback that gives me confidence that the people who are listening to this, including the Secretary of State for Education, are really aware of the sensitivities of this work. And I don't know many government, I can't think of many countries where we would have that kind of democratic interface over this particular subject, or perhaps a time before, really, maybe with the exception of Kenneth Baker really talking things through in 1988 to get to the point where that settlement then was made to allow RE to feature in the basic curriculum, and in a way which was accepted as important for a plural democratic society. So I think there are some things about the current people in charge of those parts of our system that give me optimism and hope about this in a way that I haven't quite experienced before in my lifetime of sort of professional education. 88 was about 4 years before I started to train. So I think, I think there is hope here. I feel like we are in a moment where the door is open in a way that we need it to be open. But then also the sector needs to help us as well if it wants to. So we all need to push that door further and deliver something which is very structured and gives us the best chance of getting something that we all think will work.
Thank you. As you're speaking in the chat, it's really interesting to see that people from different parts of our sector are making really constructive suggestions here about how we can invest, how we can work together. So my next question, and I'm going to ask it in a way that I hope is a neutral way, is consensus actually possible? Everyone's scared of this question. What do you think? Vanessa?
Total consensus is always very hard to get, right? So we are in a space where we have difference, and that difference is actually very important. It's part of the beauty of this field. Is that we open up and make visible those differences and work them through together and as a society and live together in a way that celebrates sort of the humanness, that essence that's so important. So I'm afraid I am hardwired to hope on this and to teaching generally. Whilst we may not get total consensus, the national content standard as the route, the route from which we're working, gives us great hope, I think, that we can move forward and achieve this. And so I do believe it's possible if we all want to make this happen. And I think my reading of the sector in all of this work in talking with people over the last year is that I think we do. And so I think we can.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yes, I do think we can. And having worked with on the NCS and spoken to so many people on this call and others as well, what I was struck by was the way that people were prepared to compromise and were prepared to give a little and to explain where the hard lines were, where their red lines, as they call it, are, in a way that meant that those of us putting that national content standard together could have a look at the language and work out what we could say. So I think because of that, because the people involved have that kind of approach, we've got to believe it's possible. I like Richard Quay's phrase that he used in a different context in Ofsted report, which was cumulatively sufficient. Cumulatively sufficient. So we won't get every single person to sign up, but I think we've got a really good chance because of the kind of people we're working with of reaching a really a consensus that will be sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, have you got a view on this?
There's part of me that says you're probably asking the wrong people, because I think we've got a good consensus between the four of us. It's easy for us to say that. Yes, I mean, I hope so. I think so. I too, we're all too young to remember 1988, which is marvelous, isn't it? But my reading, my research, I've got a chapter coming out later this month that refers to Kenneth Baker saying that the government didn't feel they could prescribe the RE curricula in faith schools, whereas Terence Copley writes about how his interpretation was the churches were happy with a national curriculum RE as long as there was some form of local denominational determination within that. So if we were that close, however many years ago 1988 was, then I'm sure, given the experience of the national content standard, the open communication that has been happening over the last number of years, yes, I'm confident we can get a consensus, and a consensus that leads to high quality RE for all pupils in all schools, in all key stages and ages.
Thank you. And I think one of the things that I've picked up a little fear around, and I think it's worth mentioning, is some people think consensus is about something imposed. It's actually, this is our opportunity to talk together and to find out where we can get enough common ground to move forward. So I think let's keep talking. And actually, that's what we're committed to as the RE Council. And that's why we're holding this session. And there will be future opportunities to engage, actually, to hear what the concerns are as well as what the opportunities are. And there are some really good questions coming to the chat. Before we move on to the questions, some of which have been they've come up in our conversation so far, I'd like to ask our panel what you think members can do in terms of being involved in moving forward. How can members of the REC engage in this? Vanessa.
Yes, so there's a couple of questions that have come in the chat about this. So So I can't say at this moment exactly who is going to sit on the EAG because I haven't sent out letters of invitation yet. But the structure of the work over the next 3-4 months will be as follows. So we will have an expert advisory group which will follow broadly, well, no, almost entirely, but not quite entirely, the makeup of the group that did the deep dive, actually, which was very cross-sector. But together with, so that we have, because the sector is so complex, has so many facets to it, we need to make sure that we cover as many of them as we possibly can in that space of time. And so there will be a number of reference groups that we will keep coming back to. One of them is a belief, a religion and belief reference group. Another will be a teachers, RE teachers reference group. So those people that actually have to deliver the curriculum. There will be a reference group related to the law and legislation to create that advice that government wants. There will be a reference group for school leaders and other similar parts of the sector, and a young ambassadors group. And we look to convene or to approach, send out, encourage input into those reference groups through the RE Council, through NATRE, and through a number of other channels that you would expect would be part of this, the DFE Faith Providers Group, for example. So I am genuinely open to listening to as many people as possible, as it's physically possible to do so between now and the end of March. So if it's not possible to be part of those groups, or you don't want to be but want to have a voice, then I'm willing to listen. Bearing in mind that this is also in addition to my full-time day job. So I'm not paid for this work, and this is independent, and I'm doing it as the CEO of Mulberry Schools Trust, but as a separate piece of work from my day job, in the way that I did the national curriculum panel work. And that's very important because it has to be an independent, as far as one can ever be, in that sort of position. So it's genuinely open. There will be ways to engage which will become very clear, and I just encourage people to contribute. In the end, the purview is delivering a set of curriculum, draft curricula that can become programmes of study to the Secretary of State, and I have added to that a report of the things that we as a sector think are really important to also be considered alongside that. So it is that straightforward, and that is the job. I hope very much that you'll contact Sarah and Katie, who's NATRE, and other people who will feed into that and make your voices heard through those means.
Thank you. So this isn't sit back and see what's delivered. This is actually continue to engage. And I can see other people are saying these organisations through being part of the REC, you've automatically got a forum in which views can be aired, which ideas can be shared. And so I would encourage all of our member organisations to continue to engage. And I think there are some really helpful things in the chat here, noting that Janet said about primary specialists being involved as well. I think that's a real concern. I know primary specialists often feel that overlooked, but we have to make sure that isn't the case. And one of the things I really want to say is that members can be involved in moving this forward, because without members and without people who are part of the RE community, we might actually achieve some kind of something to present to government, but actually we've got to carry on, and we've got to make sure that things are implemented well. So I think the point that Ruth made about being in the national curriculum doesn't necessarily determine quality. It doesn't guarantee high quality. That's our job as well. We've been continually lobbying for improvement in all sorts of different ways, and the national content standard is a kind of precursor to some of this, and we need to make sure that whatever happens, we keep up the pressure in all sorts of different ways to ensure that we don't do our children and young people a disservice, that we offer the very best. So I think that's one of the real concerns. Paul, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I'm really delighted to hear Vanessa's list of all of the different groups that are going to be part of this process. Um, One of the benefits of the agreed syllabus conference procedure in writing a syllabus is that it gives voice to religion and belief groups, it gives voice to teachers, and it gives voice to local democratically elected people. Those of us that are invested in that system forget that actually the current situation is an academy or a multi-academy trust can write their own RE syllabus referring to no one else. They don't need to consult anyone about how they present the faith they choose to present, the beliefs they choose to present. And it can simply be down to one person on their own writing a curriculum and going, this is what we'll teach. So I'm really, really, really pleased that this is going to be constructed from such a wide number of voices.
Deborah, did you want to add anything to that? No. Thank you for being clear. I think there are a number of things to pick up then from questions that have been asked, some of which have been touched on, but I think perhaps if we answer them perhaps a little bit more fully here, there are a number of questions about SACRAs, and rightly so, because a lot of us are involved in SACRAs, and it's really interesting to read Pat's question about whether there's an opportunity here with local government reform as well. I chair a SACRA that is going to be directly affected by local government reform. I've got a real interest in this. I want to make sure that things work well for SACRAs. But those questions are also connected with localization. How can we include the local if SACRAs are not going to convene agreed syllabus conferences that write the syllabus? How can we make sure of that? And Ruth pointed out that there's also an issue about engagement with current issues. And I think that's sort of connected to local and current. How can we actually have a curriculum that is living and isn't standing still? I think that's my question really. How can we make sure that SACRAs have the opportunity to be involved? We have a young person joining us now who will be affected by this. So any offers on SACRAs? And Joyce actually asked a question about whether this is an opportunity to look at reforming SACRAs, to doing something different with SACRAs perhaps.
That might be a bigger question. I mean, my vision, and this is just me thinking and writing about stuff, is that that history provides actually quite a good model of how to do national curriculum subject with local involvement. And the problem we have with regard to localism or localization at the moment is we've got different sizes and different shapes of localism. But I'm hoping that this curriculum that will lead to some programs of study will include the ability for young people in our schools to study the religion and belief that their families hold, the religion and belief that their community holds, that the school encounters. You know, having a syllabus that says in year 3 all students should study Judaism, well, that's marvelous, but in a particular school, you might not have Jews represented, but you might have a large number of Jains. And we need to make sure that there's a flexibility to do that for young people to be able to study religion and belief of their families, of themselves, of their communities, of their schools, as well as national and global religion and belief expressions as well.
Deborah, did you want to say anything about that? If anyone can lip read, you're doing really well there, Deborah.
I said, sorry, I missed the question because I had a small visitor arrive
You
in the middle of the
did.
question.
You did. Someone with an investment in the subject continuing to improve through his lifetime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's very much on my mind when I think about this whole process, because if you look at the dates and the timing, you think, right, where will they be when this comes into force? So it makes it quite personal, actually. So that's quite interesting. Sorry, what was the question, Sarah?
So we were talking about how SACRAs might be able to change, and what the role of SACRAs might be, whether this is the time to actually look at how SACRAs work and are constituted, perhaps.
Yes, I think so. And I think that's one of the things the Commission on RE in 2018 wrote about. And there's a recommendation actually in the reports that talks about that, and how we broaden the representation on SACRE, how we involve people like governors, for example, in the work, and so on. Somebody asked me a question on a podcast about this subject. What the one thing I didn't want to lose, and I think one of the things I don't want to lose, looking after 4 SACREs as I do, is the involvement of local people in the work of religious education in schools. And I think, you know, that aspect of their work, being able to be in the hot seat, as we've done in recent years because of the pandemic and so on, or actually physically in schools, in demonstrating their lived experience of religion in the local community. I think, you know, I think that's something I definitely don't want to lose as part of this process, and I don't think there's any reason why I should lose it.
Thank you. Obviously, there's a lot to be worked out, so there aren't definitive answers, particularly as the discussions in these groups haven't taken place yet. So I think we'll move on to another kind of question, which I don't think we've said very much about. And this is a question that Peter posted a little while ago, Peter Ward, about the assessment structure, that the proposed assessment structure shows greater opportunity for RE to contribute overall, but the impact may be less than assumed. Has there been any modelling of likely impact and not just the theoretical impact? Paul, did you have your hand up there?
I did.
Excellent.
I was just going to say, in answer to that question, and actually this is the data that in that footnote 303 that the review reports to. When we did the survey back in 2017, when NSACRA did the survey of members, this is a word cloud that shows what SACRAs do. And you can see that it's dominated by work around the syllabus, meetings, authority. We also asked SACRAs what they wanted to do in the future, and this arrow here was a word cloud of what SACRAs want to do. Actually, I think if we get to a situation where we have the work of running the syllabus taken out, and we can actually do more local support around places of worship, around visits, around school reviewing provision, primary and so on, I think that's marvellous. And that's given Deborah time to think about exams.
Thanks very much. I like the cooperation going on here. Deborah, would you like to say something about assessment?
Well, I mean, I think probably Vanessa is better placed to answer this than me, I have to say. But I mean, as you know, I showed that slide with the pictures of the different boxes and the different slots. And it does look to me, and Vanessa can correct me if I'm wrong, but it does look to me like more space has been created for more breadth. And when it's set out like this in a table, you can imagine it, can't you, in your option booklet, or, you know, where children are actually having their guided choices. But as I say, I stand to be corrected if I've got this wrong. Vanessa, can I ask you to follow up on that, please?
Sure. I mean, I suppose one of the things that we will have to think about in relation to this is the point about Key Stage 4, actually, that Dave Francis has put in the chat as well, because RE is mandatory at every key stage. And so it's mandatory at key stage 4 as well. I mean, it's still mandatory, of course, up to post 16, but as you know, the review has recommended that we repeal the requirement on schools to teach at post 16 unless they want to. I have to say, whilst I'm disappointed, about having to do that, having spent a very long time, even as a head teacher, trying to get Key Stage 5 RE, non-examined RE going, and finding it very difficult just simply because of the curriculum pressure and time on students to get a regular weekly slot going in the schools that I've been in. That's been a challenge. So I've had to accept that that's more likely to be successful as a voluntary piece of work than one that is mandatory. But mandatory RE at Key Stage 4 that is not GCSE needs some very careful thinking about, and then also the currency and accreditation, which of course is the argument and the consideration over time that resulted in the short course. Of course, the short course still exists, even if it doesn't have performance table currency. So, there are I think some of the more complex assessment questions sort of sit in that space, really, about, what kind of a Key Stage 4 RE do we want? I mean, not only is it mandatory, I mean, essentially, it's critical at that age to be thinking through these issues. And so, all the issues that we want to cover, the nature of the material, the subject matter that we want to cover. So we have to find a way of doing a really good job around Key Stage 4, actually, and create something that is so compelling that everyone will want to join in with it. I think, that space is the most contested, probably, around assessment.
Thank you. Now, I am aware that there are probably loads more questions that people have in their minds as well and would like to ask at some point. As I said earlier on, this isn't the end of a process. This is very much the start of something. We are on a journey, and hopefully we're on that journey together. And the RE Council can facilitate some of that, bringing questions and listening to each other. So I'd really encourage you as members of an organisation to actually use it. That's what we're here for. We are an organisation that exists to bring people together. So we may not all have the same views, and I think it's really important that we listen to some of the views that may seem a little bit difficult to some of us, because unless we understand where everybody is, we're not going to be in a position to really move forward. I'm going to ask Indy, I think, just looking at the time, I don't want us to get into another in-depth conversation, because I think we've made our panel members work really hard here as well, and to think on their feet, which is always a hard thing at the end of a day. But I'm going to ask Indy if you could just explain to us a little bit about the survey that we're going to do as a sort of toe in the water to find out where members are with what their feelings on the next steps are. That was a bit convoluted, sorry. Indy.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'll just put in the chat the link to the survey. You should also have it on the very last email you've received from Eventbrite about this particular event, and it will come out as well in a newsletter, hopefully tomorrow, if not the day after. Opportunity for you to share your views. And we talked earlier about how members can engage, how you can engage different methods. This is one of the ways. I mean, we did this with the SRGM. We did it again at the AGM. These surveys we're doing, it feeds into, yes, what the RE Council Board is thinking about, how we're representing you. It's feeding in as well, though, to Vanessa. I mean, we sent the reports, sort of the collation of the stuff we did at the AGM to Vanessa in time for her deep dive. So again, this will just form part of our response, as it were, our ability to feed into what's going on, some of that useful information. So please do engage with it. There's an opportunity for some quick kind of Leichhardt data questions. Do you agree with these or not with the recommendations? So we get a bit of a snapshot of where members are at the minute, and also some space for you to go into some depth around really some of the issues we've been talking about today. So thinking about SACRAs, thinking about consultation, thinking about the curriculum, what it looks like, all these kind of stuff. It'd be great to hear from you. Over the next few weeks, and so we can feed that in. Let's say put that in the chat, and it will come out on the newsletter in the next couple of days. Please do engage with it as organisations. That's probably what I need to say. Sarah?
Thank you. That's really helpful, and it's really good to know the newsletter's coming out soon. I hope all of you are receiving the newsletters, because if you're not, you're missing out on some really helpful information that Indy and Shauna put together for us. We are about to conclude our meeting. I would like to just ask our panel members whether they have anything they'd just like to say before we finish. And if you don't have anything more to say, that's fine. But just to give you that last chance for any concluding remarks. Vanessa.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Sarah, and your team, Indy, and anyone else behind the scenes who I don't know is helping, supporting in this from within the RE Council. But just to say thank you, really, because this can't work. It won't work. We won't get any settlement enough to be able to submit anything to the Secretary of State for Education unless you do contribute through the RE Council, and the RE Council is an extremely important part of the picture on this. This sort of hasn't come out of thin air. It's come out of a lot of work by many of you, as I said right back at the beginning, over time, and in a way, the road has risen up to this because of that work. This has not taken place in a vacuum. So I just want to say thank you to you all, really, and particularly to Sarah, because not only have you helped this to happen, but equally now over the next 3-4 months, contributing through the RE Council to ensure that we hear everything that needs to be heard, so it can be included, is going to be really, really important. So I just encourage you to do so. It's a very, very open invitation.
Thank you. Deborah or Paul, anything else to say? Well, thank you to all of our panel members for joining us, and particularly I am thanking you, Deborah and Paul, but I'd particularly like to thank you, Vanessa, because I know things are so busy at the moment, and we really appreciate you giving us this time to hear where things are, and we know there's a huge amount of work ahead, and you are doing this on top of an extremely busy day job. So thank you, and I hope I'm speaking on behalf of all of our members and beyond. But thank you all to our members and anyone else who's joined us for joining us this evening. And as I've said more than once, please continue to engage with this, and we look forward to hearing from you about this and many other things in the very busy world of religious education. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.